So good afternoon. For those who don't know me, my name is Tom Allison, Assistant Director of Finance here at Chev, and along with my colleague Yan Zhang, running point for the 6-year plan process this year. The purpose of this first orientation session is to, I think we're going to go through the templates themselves with an emphasis on the changes from the instructions and the templates from this year compared to previous years, as well as some of the strategic elements that the OP6, so that's Secretary of Finance, Secretary of Education, Director of Chev, Director of DPV, and the staff directors of House Appropriations and Senate Finance, the sort of strategies that they were looking for when they sort of engaged in this review of the process. And then, I think it's okay to ask questions throughout. We will have definitely time for discussion and questions at the end as well, but feel free to chime in as we go along. And we are also collecting some frequently asked questions that we've received in the last 5 days or so since we distributed the templates and the instructions. So I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I think I might have to hit mute all unless folks can mute your mic. Much better. Thank you much. So we can go ahead and dive right in. So everyone should have received the instructions and templates on Wednesday, May 17th. Thank you for those that have responded or offered a few questions and reactions already. But this is, and we recognize there's been a lot of changes. But I just want to start again by thanking all of you who provided very valuable feedback during the CISBO and FAC meetings and other opportunities. I think you'll find, at least I hope, you'll find that your feedback was incorporated throughout. That said, there are some strategic elements here that the OP6 was really interested in seeing in this plan, and that did require some changes. So I think generally you'll see more changes in the narrative than in the Excel template, but there's a number of changes in the Excel template as well. But just to sort of summarize a few of the changes that you're going to see, OP6 was interested in being more data driven. And I think you'll see that in your individual fact pack, where you'll see, trends focusing on the same sections that are in the narrative questions themselves. So, those do map together pretty well, and we'll be able to dive into the narrative section later on in this webinar. But I think also there was a greater interest in actually looking 6 years out. I think we're all fans of names that actually accurately describe what they are. And, there were many parts of the 6-year plans which were only going out 2 years. Obviously, there's important reasons for that, but, you'll see these plans looking a little further out. And there's always an emphasis on enrollment, and enrollment projections have been a part of the 6-year plans, but I think you could argue they're more integrated now. So again, the sort of main 3 categories, this is sort of the last thing I'll get into in terms of the themes you'll see, but I mentioned enrollment. There's a strong emphasis towards enrollment. There's a strong focus on performance and workforce alignment. So I think you'll see that, particularly in the narrative section, and financial effectiveness and sustainability. So, some of these are connected, why we're looking, 6 years further out, and all that's connected to enrollment as well. So those are sort of some of the themes I think that you'll see in the narrative templates themselves. So again, Yan and I are going to go through the templates. We also have some representatives from Boston Consulting Group on the line. So before they are going to share an opportunity to engage with them in some one-on-one sessions to sort of better understand the sort of how they can help you navigate the process. And I think they've got some specific examples on like what would be good reasons to engage with them. It wouldn't be, hey, I think my data is wrong in the fact pack. You can still come to us and we'll at Chev and we'll work through those. So we'll have a little bit of time at the end of the session to go over that. So that's it in a nutshell. Before I sort of dive into the Excel template itself and share my screen, are there any questions or comments from anyone on the webinar before we dive in?
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
It's Leslie Brown at VCU. I was wondering, as if you go through the template, you could kind of maybe track back to where in the narrative this data might need to show up, because normally we have to like put in what page of the narrative in the past. So that would be helpful if we could kind of, and maybe that's no longer the case. So they are related, but not directly related documents. But if they are to be, that would be helpful.
Got it. Good point, Leslie. Yeah, I think you'll see that the narrative template has changed in a way that we're sort of requesting shorter answers and bullets. It might be possible though to still refer back to the specific question number. If you're looking at the Excel, you might be able to refer back to the question number, going that direction. Going the opposite direction, I think it's possible that the short answers can refer back to the academic plan in the Excel version. So I think there are probably ways we could do make sure those we're making those citations to make this coherent. But I will mark back, and that's a good sort of question, I think, for our frequently asked questions. So thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen and go over the Excel template. Again, with a focus on sort of what has changed and some of the things that that I think might reflect what OPS6 is looking for. So sorry to ask this, but can everyone see my screen? Great. Thank you. So, okay, we've got these 6 tabs at the bottom. Tab 1, there hasn't been any changes at all. Your institution name, institution ID, the individual responsible for the plan. It's always good for us to have a single point of contact. And so we still have a single point of contact in our records, and we keep a secondary list as well. But this is same old, same old. Any questions about institution ID tab? And okay, let's go ahead and move on to tab 1. Undergraduate tuition and mandatory fee increase plans. The format has changed on this a little bit, but this is essentially the same thing we've done in the past. Yes, we understand that there could be a swing in $300 million for E&G from the general fund for FY24. We know that a lot of tuition and fees are still in the still up in the air and subject to any changes to FY24. But we sort of worked through this last summer too, where we had last minute changes through the summer. And we also have the concurrent process of the tuition and fees report and that collection that was due earlier this month. Yes, Ms. Fulton.
Hi, I'm Dr. Fulton from Norfolk State University.
Thank you,
Dr. And I hate to take you back, but on the first institutional ID page, does the person responsible, is it supposed to be the chief academic officer or president or chief finance officer. This is the kind of the first time I'm going through. Well, this is the first time all of us went through this one, right? So, if you could clarify that, please.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Fulton. That's a good question. I mean, it varies. I'd say the majority are the chief financial officer of each institution.
Okay.
We've got at least one institution where it's the president.
Mhm.
So I think it's whatever works for you. But generally the staff person that is, directly responsible for submitting the plans, and will be able to delegate other pieces as they come up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should have asked, are my tabs updating too as I go through the tabs? So you guys see tab 1 here? Okay, good.
For this tab, actually adding the out-of-state undergraduate tuition fees and the non-ENG fees. So basically 2 groups: in-state undergraduate tuition, ENG fees, and non-ENG fees. And the other line, the out-of-state undergraduate tuition and mandatory fees.
Yep. Thanks, Yan. Yeah, that is an addition. Okay. I'm under no illusion that these first 2 tabs, how quickly we're going through them, are indicative of how the rest of this is going to go. But any other questions about tuition and fees before we move on?
Okay. Can you, I'm sorry, can you verify what you just said about graduate? I don't see graduate anywhere on this chart, but I thought that's what she was referring to.
No, I believe she was referring to out of state as the addition. Yeah,
Yeah,
this should be all in-state undergraduate. Excuse me, just undergraduate.
correct. Only undergraduate.
So apologies for that confusion. Moving on to tab 2 and revenue. There are some changes in this tab. I'll try to hit them all, but one of the reasons why we do these sessions is if I forget something, there's a good chance it'll come up in discussion and questions. So here we're looking for total collected or projected to collect revenues after discounts and waivers. So, these essentially needs to be funds that hit your books, and so would not include discounts and waivers that your institution might provide to students on the front end. Now, it would include tuition revenue used for financial aid. So the funds hit your books, and you provide that institutional aid using that non-general fund revenue. As you can see, it also goes out 6 years. So the first 2 years hasn't really changed too much. I mean, we've got the actual for FY23, and then the plan for 25 and 26. And again, we've got a note here. We understand if the budget changes, we'll have to go to OP6 and figure out how to deal with that. But currently, this hasn't changed that much in terms of the assumption of no new general fund, because again, we're collecting NGF revenues here, but then also getting the actual revenue collected after discounts and waivers.
Tom,
Yeah, Dennis.
The discounts, waivers. I know that there is some reporting in the student financial assistance tab, but is the number here is going to be net, and what's going to be the relationship, I guess, because I thought there was a net number on the student financial assistance tab. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, Dennis, I'm glad you asked that, because it is an often source of confusion. The relationship is in the financial aid tab. When we say tuition revenue used for financial aid, it needs to be coming out of what's here on this tab. So it's revenue you collected, and then we're able to spend on scholarships after you collected that revenue, and we are saying that's distinct from a tuition discount, where sort of at the beginning of a student's billing cycle, you offer them a discounted tuition. So that's really, it's the difference between deferred revenue, money you didn't collect, and then the expenditure. So the expenditure, the tuition revenue used for financial aid, that's what you see over on tab 3.
Okay, I think I got it.
So actually, basically, the tab 3 column B, that tuition revenue is linked to this sheet. So once you enter tab 2, and that column B is automatically shows up.
Okay, so the amounts going into column F and column G do not appear in, I guess, what is that? That's column C. Or no, that would be column B.
Well, again, like Ian mentioned, sorry, getting a little bit of feedback. Column B is the total tuition revenue. So that's what you're actually collecting from tab 2, and it's linked to tab 2. If you can see that up where the revenue is,
Right.
it's pulling that in. So then the rest of this tab is collecting different types of financial aid that is funded by tuition revenue for various policy and financial aid sort of decisions and discussions.
Okay.
But the idea is that this is getting funded by the total tuition revenue.
Okay, got it.
Yes, for tab 3, the rest of columns, institutions must fill in the data. But the column B is linked to tab 2.
Okay, I got it. I understand.
Great. And now, one difference again is, a lot of these going out 6 years. We're going to talk a lot about sort of, why we're thinking about that. I mentioned that at the top. It's something that, the OPSEX was interested in projecting further out. Now we've generally referred to everything in years 3 through 6 as pro forma, and generally doesn't look as much at the general fund or non-general fund. The fund split, that's what you get to do in tab 5 on a calculator, and we'll get there shortly. But the instructions, are asking for this pro forma analysis of total tuition revenue, holding your tuition rates constant, and really only kind of looking at your submitted enrollment projections for each year. I would argue that's kind of it's a loose connection. Again, this is a pro forma analysis, but generally the idea is that because we're trying to sort of establish a baseline of non-general fund and general fund needs moving forward, these instructions are asking you to just take into account your enrollment projections and not necessarily how much additional, not how much you would raise your tuition rates. I know we're going to get into more of this in a bit as we advance through the tabs. But again, no assumption of additional general fund support. And again, you're not supposed to assume that you're going to raise your rate above the 26 levels.
So Tom, this is Katie from UVA. Quick question on that as it relates to the financial aid tab. Are we supposed to assume that not only tuition, but the rest of cost of attendance stays at flat? And that the revenues are only growing by enrollment growth, and therefore financial aid would only grow by enrollment growth or changes in need profile? Or I guess, you know, if we think housing and room and board will go up, you know.
That is a good question. I don't have an immediate answer for. Let's see. Of course, our auxiliary only goes out to 26.
Yeah, I think tab 3 is still just focusing on the tuition and the mandatory ENG fees. So even if you housing goes up in the outer years, it doesn't impact the financial aid table of this tab 3, right?
But it does if we're providing financial aid that covers any of those elements of cost of attendance.
Yeah, so it wouldn't necessarily impact program 108, but perhaps other discounts and waivers, unfunded scholarships that would go beyond tuition and fees.
Yeah.
Tom, this is Leslie again. Can you clarify the goal of tab 2, I guess? The pro forma, like, is it just a way of trying to translate enrollment into dollars? Is that basically what they're looking for?
Yeah, so I'd say there's not a direct connection between enrollment and dollars, you know, so there's no tab here for the enrollment projections, and we're not trying to, you know, take a quantity times a rate and then see what the NGF is. You know, you are still reporting your non-general fund revenue here. In terms of the purpose, it reflects the priority of the OP6 to be looking a little further out. I do think a lot of OP6 members have, you know, read about the enrollment cliff in 2026 and are concerned about the impact that's going to have on our institutions, both budgetary and for sustainability. So I think that's the main reason why the administration has been prioritizing going 6 years out. And I think similarly, the governor's introduced budget needs to go out 6 years too. And, you know, last December, in Secretary Cummings's presentation to the Muddy committees, you know, they presented a balanced budget for 6 years out that included the tax cuts and included the 2% salary increases that we'll get to in a minute here on tab 4. But I think, you know, in some ways, the General Assembly is interested in keeping the governor's office to 6 years on some of those assumptions there. And then in general, OP6 is, you know, just concerned about the long-term picture, particularly as it relates to enrollment and its impact on your budgets.
Okay. And we had this discussion, this question, the FAC. No assumption means assume no greater funds, or this
Yes.
does not guide us in any way. We can make any assumption we want.
It means assume no new general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Apologies for that. Yep. And at the bottom, you know, we've got our auxiliary revenue here, in-state students and other students. Again, only up to 26. And I think, Katie, to your point, we might be able to offer some clarification on the financial aid that covers these sorts of auxiliaries, and we might be able to clarify that. And maybe it's worth a conversation offline too, and a conversation with Lee Andes.
Thanks, Tom.
Hi, Mary. No.
Okay. The financial aid tab, this is actually not changed very much at all.
There's one more in tab 2 addition. You go back to tab 2.
Yeah, go ahead, Jan.
Line 25 that Lou highlighted, that is a new line, and the old 6-year plan templates only collecting the tuition revenue, but this one actually we call it a revenue because we want institutions to also provide it the funded general fund, so we can having a total E&G revenue. And we understand that we don't have the final budget for 24 yet. So hopefully we will have it soon, so you can really put into the 24. And then after 24, all the lines are basically keep flat. So the rest of the cells for the rest of the years, you just put the 24 general fund in those cells.
Going back to assuming no new general fund. So we'll keep emphasizing that. Thanks, Yan. Thanks for pouring out line 25. Any other questions about tab 2? Okay. Tab 3 really has not changed much at all from the previous year. We've really only added this implied discount rate, which is really just a rate of the sum of these scholarships and tuition revenue for aid over total tuition revenue. We've got the same calculator for whether you're compliant with the rule that prohibits out of in-state tuition revenue to be subsidizing out-of-state students. So this is the same if and statement that we've had in previous years, and it goes out in that pro forma out the 6 years to 2030. Any other questions or comments on the financial aid tab? Okay, let's move on to tab 4, because this one's seen a good amount of changes from the previous years. So the academic and financial plan, this used to be in 2 parts, so a part A and a part B, and we have now combined them for a few reasons. One, in many ways, we were summing them anyway to get an idea of modeled future expenditures. And so, if you're going to be spending more money on salaries or spending more money on a new program, hiring faculty, advisors, et cetera, in many ways, they sort of summed to the same subtotal. So there's one reason why we combine them. The assumptions here are also worth emphasizing and spending some time on. I mentioned earlier how the governor's budget goes out 6 years and assumes a 2% salary increase between FY24 and 2030. So that's the assumption that you see in the pro forma from 2024 into 2030. It assumes from FY27 to FY2030 assumes this 2% salary increase with the general fund share the state picking up its general fund share, which is in a table in tab 4B. It also assumes 3% health insurance increase and 5.36% VITA cost increase. And again, that tab 4B is there to help you easily look up and calculate the institution share and the general fund share. Now, so that's looking further out. It's possible that your institution will want to increase faculty salaries beyond that assumed 2%. And that is okay and allowed in this sheet, but the general fund portion above the 2% would not be included here. So the assumption is that the general fund will pick up the 2%, but if you want to raise it, say 4%, then you have to pay 100% for that additional 2%, and include the those costs here. These are all relative to the baseline, so these are all marginal increases. We've organized them by salary and benefits, which I discussed a bit. The assumptions there.
Tom?
Yep.
Actually, if institution plans to use its own fund to provide additional salary increases, it should be put, insert new lines under that 3%
Right here.
annual state health costs. So basically, the whole categories about salary increases that listed in the box, that should be only the 2% fund split between state and institution.
Yep. So it says add lines and descriptions here if you wanted to raise above that 2%, and the rest of the assumptions that are here. So thanks for that clarification.
Can I ask about the 2% for fiscal 24? I mean, we have a budget from last biennium that said 5% for fiscal 24. So is this essentially asking us to downgrade that to 2%?
No, I think that would be, I'm sorry if I jumped ahead a little bit by getting into the 2% assumptions. I think right now for 24, you assume what's currently in the budget, which is the 5%. And then it's moving forward beyond this biennium where these assumptions kick in.
Okay, so in the red, it should really be fiscal 25 to fiscal 30?
Yeah, it's a good catch.
Okay.
I think that's right.
And Tom, this is Jennifer at CNU.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So if we're in the out years, it's a 2% salary increase for the state side, and you'll provide the general fund share, and then increases in fringe benefits, providing the associated general fund share. But we can't show our non-general fund piece from tuition revenue or tuition increases that would have to cover those increases. I guess I'm confused. So we have to keep tuition flat in the out years, but yet there'll be state mandate increases where you all are providing our state share, but we can't increase our share.
Yes, that is generally my understanding of the instructions here. And I think it gets back to tab 5 on the pro forma when it enables us to calculate the additional costs and and what we have for the revenues, which are flat unless you have high enrollment projections, right? If you're projecting to grow, then that can help you. But
sure. But if you're not projected to grow, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
No, it's a good clarification. Even before the group went back and forth on this a lot. And I think I recognize that it is in many ways, these assumptions are going to produce, a modeled budget deficit. And because we're, assuming that you have to pay for the, your portion of the 2%, but not letting you raise funds for it. So I think we recognize that. And I think hopefully it'll play out with the calculator on tab 5.
Yeah, I guess time will tell. I just think it's not realistic picture.
Hey Tom, I'm sorry, I may have misheard you. When we're talking about doing the increases for salaries, like let's just say it's going to be 5% for next year. Did you say, so for the total amount, we would be including the full 5%, that total cost that we have, and on essentially, let's just say like line 12? Is that right? So it'll include like, it'll include the total cost, which is split funded between us and new general funds, right?
Well, we don't have I mean, there's no FY25 budget calling for a 5% increase.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
Okay.
it would be built, I guess it's built in though. So you have to assume that the FY24 5% has happened, and that's where it's going to be. And then that's my interpretation. But yeah, and I don't know if you had any other sort of way to describe that. What's going on here in this first box for FY25?
Yeah, those are the additional annual 2% salary increase over 24 of salary cost.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think I was thinking about the years wrong, so I apologize.
Well, and as I think it was Leslie pointed out, I think we do have a misleading instruction here in the red text. So by saying that it's each year from FY24 to FY2030, it really should be FY25 to FY2030. So we're not helping with that confusion, and this point noted. So as Yan mentioned, just looking further down, this new and expanded academic programs, this would be generally we would refer to as, it was 3A, I think. So this is where you would add, new academic programs, new initiatives, et cetera. But you'll notice the amount from general fund is grayed out because again, this is back to assuming no new general fund.
I'm sorry, can you go up and do something so the titles, I was trying to follow along with the titles that are on row 10. Can those stay on the screen? I was trying to figure that out.
Yeah, like freeze the
Yeah, if you can.
everyone's gonna watch me try to do this, Dennis.
Think if you're on cell 11 and hit freeze, it should work. Or row 11.
Right. Cells.
Tom, you got to put your cursor on row 11, but then go back to view at the top.
There you go.
And where it says freeze panes. To freeze panes, yeah.
That works. Okay, so
I was referring to the grayed out, right, with your new programs, assuming no general fund to support those new programs and initiatives.
So is there any feeling or anything direction coming from the OPS6 to look at tuition increase versus reallocation? I mean, I would say for the most part, the universities are, we don't have a whole lot of opportunity to reallocate funds. I mean, maybe I'm speaking for myself, speaking for Norfolk State, but we don't have a whole lot that we can stop doing to reallocate to do other things. That's always hard when we try and do it. But I understand the issue of not wanting to raise the tuition on students. But does the OPS6, are they giving any direction there?
Dennis, do you refer to the next two biennium?
Well, yeah, the next two bienniums, whereas reallocation versus tuition.
Yeah, institutions are required to make plans for tuition increases. Even in tab 1 and tab 2, that's what we collected, the data. Only for the starting 26, 27 academic years, so the last 4 years, the pro forma years, assuming no tuition increase. So basically only based on the enrollment changes.
Okay,
So that's
but
what Tom said, that estimating, if you will run deficit, if you don't have enough funding to fund whatever you need to do for those other years. But for 25, 26 physical years, the institution need to plan the tuition increases.
okay, but should we be relying more on tuition increases to fund our objectives or
I
reallocation?
can't hear what they're saying.
We can hear you.
Were you able to hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, Dennis, I mean, I think, you know, there's always going to be an interest in reallocation. I think OPSEC is always going to want to see that. And I think, you know, maybe during the budget process, they're sort of used to seeing, you know, requests for increases, but not, you know, ways to be, you know, to reallocate from either older programs and things like that. So there's always going to be an interest in reallocation. I imagine this is going to vary a lot between institutions. So in terms of interest, I mean, yeah, no one wants to see tuition go up. They're always going to want to see something on reallocation, but I think this is also, you know, this isn't necessarily I mean, it's not a budget. I mean, this is for planning. But I don't know. Do any of the other institutional representatives have any thoughts about that relationship? Or I mean, just because I think I know what you're saying, and I guess we're offering the opportunity for both. And if it ends up being 100%, you know, new tuition revenue, then you know you mark that down and we work through it. Does anyone else have any comments? Or I'm sorry, Dennis, if I didn't answer either.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's fine. I mean, and we always try to do as much as we can with reallocation, but that becomes real difficult. To you know to build new programs, build you know changes, basically with a flat revenue. So.
Yep. And I guess, you know, I mean, this is for 25 and 26, the revenue, you know, isn't necessarily flat, right? I mean, where we say we want your revenue to be flat is on the pro forma going further out for years 3, 4, 5, and 6. So here, you know, your plans, projected revenue, you know, that does include your changes, you know, so you can raise rates here. So you know your revenue doesn't have to be flat. That assumption of flat revenue comes in the out years. Was someone else trying to jump in?
Yeah, Tom, I was going to ask, this is the section where we see in column, whatever that is, Q. Please, it references the narrative. Could you talk a little bit, is that A3? Or in other words, what are the top 3 to 5 strategic priorities? In other words, could you help us walk back and forth? Because at least at VCU, we have kind of numbers people and writing people and program people, and we're all trying to figure out how our pieces relate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, the narrative is pretty well mapped to the fact pack, and maybe it may not be as clear in terms of the connection between the narrative and the Excel, but you know, I think, you know, if you're looking at something like, you know, increasing salaries, and you want to reference the specific narrative question, yeah, I think referring to the number and letter itself, like you said, you know, 3A, I think would be appropriate. And you know, if let's say there's a question about financial effectiveness and and stability. Maybe you can sort of reference back to that particular one by, let's say looking at some reallocation you've got here. You could refer back to that exact narrative question. I think you're going to have some versatility, though. Like I said, I think the fact pack maps very closely to the narrative, and here you might just have a little bit more, like I said, flexibility and variation. I don't think we're looking for an exact connection and everyone doing it the exact same way to connect their narrative on in the same way here in column Q.
So just to beat a dead horse, I get the fact pack and the narrative connection, but things like we used to have to explain, I don't know, utility increases. So at this point, you don't care, right? You just put in the number and we can be silent and we all know utilities are going up. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sorry, this is Jeff from ECG. I mean, there is a column there. The column that's there at the end is there for a reason. So if it's something that can sort of be explained in a sentence, then I would just dump it in that cell. Like I would have something. And you can make the cell bigger, wider, etc. If it's just a sentence, then or a bullet, then I would just put it in there. If there's nothing, I don't think you need a page of explanation or backup data on why your utilities are going up. But just if there's something simple you can provide that gives it some context, that would be helpful. If it's something that's more substantial and particularly on sort of tab 6 when you're getting into requests, then I'd probably make sure that it's captured somewhere in the narrative. But it's just sort of basic stuff like, yeah, utilities are going up. Here's what percentage we assumed, or here's why we assume this. Then I'll just stick it in there.
Okay, from your mouth to the writer's ears.
And there is also at the end of the narrative, I can't remember what letter it is at this point, L or so, there's an additional information section. So if there's anything you feel like there should be more context on, but it doesn't quite fit with any of the other questions, that's an opportunity to add that as well. But I don't think you need to go line by line through this tab and like have a paragraph on each. I don't, that feels like overkill to me.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, agree. Okay.
Now, still this tab, there are 2 lines that's new this year, line 5 and 6, that the institutions are required to put in estimated 22-23 E&G expenditures and the estimated 23-24 expenditures too.
Yeah, trying to make sure I got that right. We're looking at current year expenditures and next year expenditures?
Correct. Because that will be used in tab 5.
Okay.
Because tab 5 is calculating any incremental changes or whether you have enough revenue to cover your costs.
Okay. All right, I get it.
And hopefully that'll be a little clearer when we get to tab 5 in just a second. I did want to point out, this is here at the bottom on row 52 to 55. This is just a calculator that we've sort of always had a version of this. So you don't have to worry about it. We do have a incorrect formula here where, so like right now it's pulling H50, and I believe, that's the amount from general fund. And it really should be the amount from tuition revenue, I believe. But this is a calculator for Chev's purposes that we sent out with an incorrect formula. But again, it's sort of used for reviewer purposes, but so we can fix it on our end. Any other questions about tab 4? Okay. We mentioned earlier we provided the general fund share and 4B. So this is a result of the base adequacy calculation and has been traditionally used for the fund split on salaries and the like. Any questions there?
Hi, this is Devanna Fulton again. Could you explain, so is the percentage what the general fund provides of the budget? The state meaning, and then the rest of it comes from tuition or whatever other sources?
Yeah, it's much more complicated than that, unfortunately. So it's a result of the base adequacy calculation, which has a number of inputs, but does produce a number for how much the state should support based on goals and inputs and other assumptions. But Yan, did you want to take that one on, maybe as briefly as possible?
Yeah, actually, she was correct. That's if at the total level, and also in terms of salary and the fringe benefit, that health insurance costs, that's how you do the fund split. You are correct.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's how you do it. But I'm talking about the source of the base adequacy calculation itself and how that produces this table.
Yeah, that's a enrollment driven calculation based on the FY22 actual enrollment by student level and domicile, and also faculty salary is the major driver. And basically these two are the major ones, and there's also some minor fringe benefit rate and also institutions budget for like program 102, 103, and program 10140 community education. And then the rest of formula driven calculation.
Okay.
And to derive this general fund share cost.
Would it be possible to get that sent out to us by institution? Just it helps inform us if we know and understand that calculation.
All right.
Sure. Any institution who would like to, just send me an email. I will send you the calculation, but just be mindful, these are multiple sheets. And if you are first time to look at it, you may not be able to fully understand, but feel free to ask questions.
Okay. All right. I would like to see them just because it is not clear to me, and maybe the sheets might help, but then maybe asking questions once I see the sheet.
Are you from Norfolk State?
Yes.
Dennis can help you. He already has this file. Thanks.
Well, I'm not sure if, anyway, okay, thanks.
Good deal. Yeah, happy to set those up, follow-ups for base adequacy. And we've got slide decks and some other reports too that sort of start more at the higher level, which might be good to do. Okay, keep an eye on the time. I'm going to move over to tab 5, these pro forma calculations. Now, essentially, institutions do not need to submit anything on this tab. It is, populated through formulas and linked cells. But it's essentially trying to, again, sort of recognizing the OPS6's strategic interest in looking further out. more or less creates a pro forma surplus and deficit, and the incremental surplus and deficit by summing the additional revenues that are in the revenue tab, summing the additional expenditures that are coming from the academic and financial plan, and then creates a pro forma surplus and deficit. And again, I just want to, Jennifer, your comments on not being a realistic picture are sort of well taken by holding you to certain assumptions, but then not others. But our hope is that the sort of scenario calculator are going to allow yourselves and Op6 to be able to sort of better understand the long-term implications of revenue projections and the academic and financial plans moving forward. So again, there's nothing you sort of have to do here. I mean, but it's important for us, I guess, that you understand it. But where all the main inputs on the calculators are right here, where it says input percentages here. And so we're with any basic plan, you can plug in how much something should be paid for through expenditure reductions, through tuition and fee increases, or through the general fund increase. I believe when we were talking this morning, just sort of preparing for this webinar, we actually thought it'd be a decent idea for you to turn in your initial plan with those still zeroed out. I think the idea is that yourselves, but then also the folks analyzing the plans will be able to adjust those as they see fit and produce different scenarios.
So, Tom, when you put those percentages then apply to all the years?
Yes, I believe so. That are down here on the implied, reallocation, implied tuition and fees, implied general fund. Yeah, I believe that it keeps the same percentages through all the years.
Okay, I'm going to speak for myself here as a analyst of 40 years and not for VCU necessarily, but I'm kind of uncomfortable with the notion that this is driving discussions with the Op6. And I don't know, we've got a sheet that's a pro forma but not a projection, and then we've got this sort of fixed percentages, and we're going to go to our leadership and say, oh yeah, put in 0. And it just I don't know, it doesn't feel like a realist. It doesn't feel like we're being given the opportunity to get to a sort of truly strategic discussion. This is seeming even more fantastical a little bit. But again, please keep in mind that I'm just speaking for myself.
Sorry, this is Jeff. Can you say a little, which part of this are you reacting to specifically putting in? I think so. Tom's in. I think what Tom meant when he said put zeros in those boxes was that the scenario calculator at the bottom should be seen as a tool, not as a submission. And so the idea is like if you happen to throw in 40-40-20 or 20-20-40, whatever it is, that you don't want that to be interpreted as that's what you're saying should happen. It's just a question of playing around with the numbers and seeing how they work. And so I think that's what Tom was saying, just put it at 000, just to say this was just a tool. And once you submit, it's not actually part of the submission. Is that what you were reacting to, or were you reacting to a different piece of this?
I guess this was a little bit cumulative, my sort of reacting to it. But Jeff, let's not take up everybody's time kind of to sort of the reaction of an old fart analyst to what seems like, I'm hearing we're supposed to be driving towards strategic discussions, and it feels like what we're driving towards is a lot of what if spreadsheets which doesn't necessarily feel like a strategic discussion. I'm a little troubled at the thought of how you translate this to leadership in terms of real planning and what we would actually say is the plan. But we can,
So
debate.
yeah, I mean, I think
We can debate this with alcohol offline.
no, I don't. So I don't want to debate it. I think let me take one crack at sort of explaining it, because I your question may come in different flavors from other folks as well. I don't expect you to be the only one with that question or reaction. So here's what I would say is I think the Op6 was trying to find a healthy balance between how do you take a long-term perspective on the financial trajectory of institutions while accounting for the fact that there are lots of unknowns and really planning beyond one biennium when you have a 2-year budget cycle is kind of tricky, and at best tricky, and at worst a waste of time, right? And so the idea was we wanted to try to keep the 2 years. The 2 years is a projection. It's very similar to the exercise in past years. But then when we thought about what would a 6-year look like, what are we really trying to get at? The idea is to take the things that can be somewhat sort of predicted, or are already being predicted or budgeted out, which are expenditures and enrollment, right? So we're really just saying, what this tab is really just saying is take your enrollment projections and take your expenditure projections and turn them into some sort of number. And that number needs to be covered either through reallocation, tuition and fee increases, or general fund increases, right? Those are the only 3 ways to cover that number. And so let's get a sense for how that plays out. And is there some reasonable way to cover those dollars with some combination of those 3 things? If the answer is yes, then great. We don't have to figure out what that combination is now. We just need to see, is there a reasonable combination? If the answer is no, we can't actually find a reasonable combination of these 3 numbers that can cover that deficit, then that warrants a strategic conversation. That's what I think this is ultimately intending to be. As I said on the fact call, I think maybe for some institutions, this might not be a very interesting tab. For some institutions, it might be a very interesting tab. It kind of depends. We had to put, the same template there for everybody, but that's the goal. It's not really about the specific numbers, the specific percentages. It's about getting a sense in a ballpark high level view of the long-term financial trajectory of an institution to see if there's something that doesn't look right in the long term. We don't want to wait 4 years to have that conversation. We should be having that conversation now.
Thank you for the larger explanation.
Good deal. I know these conversations will continue. Again, just kind of keeping my eye on the clock. And again, just want to emphasize, we're available. First tomorrow we have another webinar, but then also offline and any time. Finally, part 6, tab 6, general fund requests. This has not really changed at all from previous years. We've changed the order. We like the strategies to match the academic and financial plan, so we can see how much general fund support you're asking for compared to non-general fund support, if there is one here, which again, that's what we want to see. We will be looking to see if the total amount matches the total amount here. The only thing we added these categories to make it easier on the back end in terms of analysis. You can see on the drop-down menu here, degree pathways, economic development, enrollment management, financial aid, etc. And we've got an other, if there's one that that doesn't fit what you're looking at. So not a ton of changes on the general fund requests. questions, comments there? Okay, well, I'm going to recommend that we move to the narrative section. So let me bring that up and share that. Okay, so there have been more changes made to the narrative than the Excel, you could argue. But hopefully in some ways this isn't as daunting as a task as it might look when you're looking at the fact pack that came with the instructions, as well as, you know, the additional numbers of questions. We did trim a few where we could, but I would just point out the instructions we have here about being concise as possible. I think short answers and bullet points are sort of the format that the reviewers will be happy with. There are a number of questions that say optional. We mean that. They really are optional. It's not like, you know, you didn't get a, you know, you want to do it to get a full grade. We recognize that a lot of these questions will be more relevant for some institutions than others. And that's a case, again, where I think you can be shorter and not have to go into too much depth. But at the end of the day, the fact pack is meant to be a primer for the meetings in August, but also, you know, sort of be a primer for some of these questions. And these questions do map pretty directly to the sections in your individual fact pack. Last thing I'll say is that, you know, I was hoping to send the Excel documents to you today with the backup data. Didn't get around to it, but I'm very close to sending it. Just got pulled into too many meetings today. But that is forthcoming. So you can, you know, make it easier to check that information. I don't think it makes sense for me to go through each question, but I do think you see some trends with each section. Tends to be, you know, what are the primary drivers of the trends, which, you know, give us some specificity or some color to the trends we might see in a given section. Part two, what are your plans moving forward? And then there's generally a third question of, you know, what are the resource implications for that strategy? Obviously it varies and you can see them all here. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but just wanted to emphasize the being concise. Bullet points are fine, because, you know, we do recognize there's some more questions here than there have been in previous years. Reactions to what you've seen in the narrative, anybody?
So I think, again, and I know you kind of mentioned this earlier, just saying that, you know, how the fact pack relates, you know, back to this narrative part, and it does in sections. However, the fact pack has significantly more detailed data than I feel like a lot of the questions within the narrative seem to touch on. And one of the things that we're struggling with and trying to figure out how to respond to some of this is how much of the narrative, which is much more forward-looking, which as it should be, should we be focusing on, and then how much effort or attention is going to be paid to the fact pack that may have some extremely nuanced data, like let's just say room and board rates over the last 10 years. And how much attention is going to be paid to that versus other sections or other areas by the OP6? Should we be prepared to talk about something like how our room rates changed from 2014 to 2016, you know, in a specific category? Is there, you know, and not knowing what everybody else's fact packs kind of look like, I don't know if VCU really stands out for the number of windows in our dorms or something else like that. And so I guess the question is, how should we be preparing to, is there going to be questions about this? Should we be prepared to try and respond to some of these areas? You may get, if you want us to go into detail, we could respond to the, 6-year plan narrative could be 100 pages long, trying to respond to the fact pack. So
Sure.
Can you provide any just clarity or detail of how all that will be incorporated?
Yeah, no, that's a totally fair question, David. Again, I think some of the data, some of the nuance is going to be important for institutions and some not for others. And so, we had to write the questions more broadly. We can't say, oh, why is your revenue from graduate level students increasing so much faster than undergraduate? Because that would be specific to to one institution or to a specific institution. So we had to keep them broad to that extent. I think while it's important, to go through this process, being familiar with your institutions, each sort of page of your fact pack, it's almost more, it's more important to have, I think the points of emphasis. So, where you think represents, the challenges or opportunities your institution has, and focus there. And I think, there are only 2-hour meetings in August. The OPS6 is not going to, we're not going to go through each fact pack. We're not going to start the meeting going through the slides. I think we will have maybe identified 2 or 3 sort of big themes of interest, and we can communicate those ahead of time. I think, we've discussed different ways that we can do that. But you're absolutely right. The fact pack is more nuanced and more detailed than the questions suggest, and that is for just the reality of needing to ask all institutions the same questions. But then also, again, it gets back to the point of there are going to be certain trends and charts in your fact pack that just aren't very important. Maybe they're stable, maybe they're, it's just not raising any flags. And again, I'm not saying you don't have to worry about it. I mean, I would encourage everyone to be familiar at least with the slides in your fact pack. But then, there's also opportunities here to add your own, of course, too, which I assume there'll be some questions about in a little bit. So I don't know if that answered your question, and I don't know if Jeff had any sort of additional thoughts to that.
I mean, more to come. We were very focused on getting this stuff out the door. More to come on how the 2-hour meetings are going to go. I think fairly safe to assume there's, as you know, there's plenty of questions in here, plenty of information that OPS6 is looking for. I think pretty safe to assume that if you respond to those questions, you're doing the right thing. And if there's an element in the fact pack that feels like like it's coming out as important, then I would make sure it's covered here, or you could maybe tackle it in the additional information section. I would not go point by point, page by page through the fact pack and give us your commentary or explanation. That is nobody's intention, and nor is it anybody's intention for these to be 100 pages long. And so I would try to stick to the questions in here. Feel free to reference the fact pack where needed or where appropriate or where useful. And then more to come, hopefully in the coming weeks on, some heads up on how we intend to run the sessions in August. And obviously some of that can't truly be determined until you submit your plans and someone reads them. But at least structurally, like, here's how we're planning on doing it. And it's not going to be a sort of a hot seat interrogation of various nuanced data points from the fact pack. It's going to hopefully be, give you a chance to present your strategy, couple of things we want to deep dive into, but something of that nature, but more to come on that.
Anything else? we do have, opportunities at the end for you to add any context or supporting materials. I think there's just a lot of these are fail safes in case we miss anything relevant that you can add in.
One question that we had was in the facilities question. I'm trying to find, I think it's D6. What exactly, like what timeframes when we're talking about the priorities of E&G capital projects, what timeframes are you looking at? Is it truly over the next 6 years? And I know that you had talked about in the past of this lining up with the kind of the capital 6-year plan process that's done a little separately from this. But kind of generally, what timeframes are you focused on?
I mean, I think it's the 6-year time period. The enrollment projections are going out that far. The academic plans are going out that far, and so I think this is an attempt to connect there.
Okay, thank you.
What else?
But one other thing. So before, I know there's a lot of conversations around, I think it was part of the Excel document where it's kind of breaking out our expenses, and like we had talked about having the options and the NACUBO kind of outlinings and all of that. That looks like that's been removed. Is that accurate?
Yep. That's I guess maybe a little bit of happy news is that we've removed that tab of additional collections of expenditures by subcategory and the personnel collections, so that it's not here. It's not a part of this year's process.
Great, thank you.
More evidence of your feedback being incorporated. What else?
Tom, this is Larissa Smith at Longwood. I know at the beginning instructions for the narrative cite the Virginia plan and TJ 21 and the governor's objectives. Are those compiled for us somewhere so that we can make specific reference to specific goals, or how would you all like us to approach our references to that?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I am confident that somewhere in your inbox are the governor's priorities and the Virginia plan and all of those, but that would be appropriate for us to compile and put in one place.
Yes, it would just be helpful because some of us have gotten various parts of this, so just to have us all on the same page would be great.
Yeah, I mean, for Pathways to Opportunity, the Virginia plan, those goals are laid out in the instructions of the Excel tab, but we've got more detailed sort of info than that, and we've got our one pager from Secretary Gadara's office, who looks something like that. That looks familiar to folks. We can make sure that those are distributed in the materials. I think that's appropriate. So thank you for that. Anything else? Okay. So as I mentioned, a lot of what we've heard here, we're going to add to frequently asked questions. We have another webinar tomorrow. Chev staff are always available, and we can loop in BCG staff as well. But moving forward, BCG is going to be in touch about these technical assistance opportunities. So you can expect an email from Jeff or maybe from Aaron from the BCG team. We've got, we're working on incorporating the enrollment projections that were submitted to Chev this month, and that will mean an update for the fact pack. I forget the name of the chart, but will eventually be updated with the enrollment projections. I know that's always sort of an ongoing process too through the summer, and Chev doesn't approve them until October. And then following that, all of our meetings are scheduled for August. I think a few are in early September. So thanks so much for helping us put those on the books. I might have mentioned this before. They might change like 15 minutes on the front or the end as we do some things like really just trying to plan lunch for OPSEX. But so don't be alarmed if you get any, this event has changed. It really should just be 15 minutes on the front or the back. I already mentioned if the budget comes out and things change dramatically, we'll go back to OP6 about any recommendations for how to deal with that. Yan or Jeff, any other parting comments for the group before we break?
No, I'm
no, I mean,
fine.
Sharon put a question about the BCG support in the chat. I mean, so as Tom said, we'll send out a note. I think I'm going to wait till the other orientation session is done tomorrow. So hopefully in the next day or two, you should get a note from us that's basically going to say, here's how the technical assistance will work. Here's what you use it for. Here's how to schedule a session. But it's mostly going to be email me and we'll try to connect you with the right advisor at the right time. It would be helpful if folks would give me an early read of the extent to which you intend to use our services. So if you intend to not talk to us or talk to us a bunch, it'd be helpful just to know so that we can sort of load balance and plan accordingly and not get like everyone emailing us on July 10th that they need to talk urgently. So it'd be helpful if you, even if you don't want to talk to us for a month, that's okay. But if you could give us a heads up, it'll help with scheduling and so on. And I think, continue to use Chev as your point of contact for any sort of technical questions about the questions, the Excel, the fact pack, et cetera, and they'll loop us in as needed. The technical assistance conversations are really intended to be, or think about that more as a consultation, as like a way to sort of reflect, to think about ideas, to pressure test plans and things like that, and prioritize. So that's what these sessions are for, as sort of a thought partnership exercise, so that you have someone to talk to you as you build out these plans. But more to come on that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Any questions on that? Just clarifying.
And I see Larissa, is that you with your hand up? Did we get to your question already? Is that an old hand?
You did. Sorry, I'm unused to Microsoft Teams. I will lower my hand.
Yeah, I can do it for you. It looks like. So, okie doke. All right. So again, thank you everybody. Really appreciate your feedback. I really mean it when I say your feedback was incorporated into this. I think we'll, get to a good place and continue this process. We'll post this video on YouTube. We're meeting again tomorrow. But again, if you have anything else offline you want to discuss, just shoot us an email or give us a call. So thanks everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.